When 1963 dawned, it marked the beginning of the end for many of the most powerful figures in organized crime history. Carlos Marcello, in particular, was about to see his long-desired wish come true. He knew with the revelations you're about to hear that soon he would be given the green light to kill Kennedy. The Kennedy administration was dealing crushing blows to the criminal underworld, and they had one of their most valuable assets, Joe Valachi. As one of the biggest informants in the history of organized crime, Valachi was feeding them so much information that by the time he took the stand on national television, he had already been spilling secrets for months. Raids were happening across the country, targeting spots linked to organized crime, and the Mafia's once untouchable strongholds were no longer safe. It didn't matter if you were Carlo Gambino, Mike Miranda, Paul Ricca, Tony Accardo, Sam Giancana, Trafficante Jr., Meyer Lansky, Tommy Eboli, Joe Colombo, or Sonny Franzese, or any other high-ranking mafioso. The heat was on. Arrests were being made, busts were being brought in, and old murders were being tied back to these powerful figures. The Mafia knew their time was running out, and they had to act fast. A question that often comes up on my channel is why the Mafia would want to take down the Kennedy administration. After all, they had once been on the same side, their interests intertwined. The answer is simple. Kennedy had turned his back on them, much like Franklin D. Roosevelt had done to Lucky Luciano and his men years before. But this time was different. The Mafia had become untouchable titans of power, men whose reach extended far beyond what most could imagine. They were firmly entrenched in the corridors of power, connected to the FBI, the CIA, the IRS, and every major institution in America. They knew everyone's secrets, and they knew how to play the game better than anyone. When Kennedy realized this, he knew he had to dismantle this criminal empire if he was to stand any chance of winning re-election. And with Joe Valachi on their side, the administration had the ammunition it needed. Though they had failed with Castro, they were making significant strides in dismantling organized crime and corruption. Newspapers that were heavily connected to gangsters, like Tony Accardo and his brother Martin, were now at risk. Editors and publishers, afraid of Kennedy's wrath, had long avoided printing anything against the Kennedys, and in 1962 they had Valachi, the administration now the power to take control of the narrative. This shift wasn't just about the mob, it was about the collapse of an empire. It was about the fall of the Colombo crime family, once the Joe Profaci crime family, and the devastating impact Kennedy's crackdown was having on the men and families involved. The influence of the Mafia was starting to unravel, and the effects were being felt far and wide. Take, for instance, Sonny Franzese, the father of Michael Franzese, a powerful member of the Colombo family. Newspapers like Newsday began to focus heavily on Sonny and his family, with Michael Franzese even accusing the publication of ruining their lives by publishing lies and false accusations. The constant media exposure was taking its toll, but it was a sign of the times, a time when the Kennedy administration was systematically dismantling the Mafia's infrastructure, from the streets to the boardrooms, and no one was immune. The Mafia's grip was slipping, and as the year unfolded, it was clear that the stakes had never been higher. Kennedy's fight against organized crime would prove to be a turning point in both American politics and the underworld, and the consequences of that battle would echo throughout the Mafia for years to come. The 1960s marked a decade of relentless warfare in the underworld of organized crime. Mobsters across America faced attacks that sent shockwaves through their syndicates, rippling through history with consequences still felt today. New York, always a battleground, found itself particularly vulnerable. Many of its crime families were aging, their power waning as old regimes faded. Among one of the most powerful families in America at the time, the Profaci crime family stood as a formidable force, helmed by the old-school gangster Joe Profaci. Profaci was no ordinary mob boss. A staunch ally of Charlie Luciano, He shared Luciano's vision of transforming gangsters into businessmen, boardroom tycoons rather than street-level thugs. Emerging as a key figure in the 1940s, Profaci played a pivotal role in shaping the structure of organized crime. Under his leadership, the Mafia leveraged unions and industrial unrest to solidify its grip on American society. The Great Depression had left workers vulnerable, and Profaci, along with his peers, exploited this to seize control of unions, transportation hubs, and major industries. By the 1930s, the Italian and Jewish Mafia dominated the very lifeblood of America, controlling the arteries of commerce and labor. Profaci's empire extended across gambling rackets, union manipulation, narcotics, and a myriad of criminal enterprises, establishing him as a powerhouse in the underworld. But his reign couldn't last forever. Aging and in poor health, Profaci's leadership became a question of succession. The Genovese family, Carlo Gambino and Tommy Lucchese, titans of organized crime, attempted to negotiate a peaceful transition of power. However, their efforts only ignited a brutal war within the family. The war within the New York Mafia during the 1960s was a bloody spectacle that showcased the fractures within organized crime. Decades of violence and fragile alliances had done little to instill unity among these men. Even as they reached new heights of power, internal strife persisted. The Mafia's top-tier families, led by figures like Carlo Gambino, Tommy Lucchese, and the Genovese family, focused on securing their wealth and influence, leaving others to squabble over the scraps. This strategic divide-and-conquer approach was epitomized by Carlo Gambino, who, following Joe Frank Scalise's, Longhi Zwilman and Colombo's death, stripped all the syndicates of their most profitable assets, both legitimate and illegitimate, leaving them weakened and in chaos. The conflict between Joe Profaci and Joe Gallo reached its zenith in the 1960s, escalating into a deadly feud marked by kidnappings and retaliatory shootings. Gallo's crew waged war against Profaci loyalists, turning the streets into a battleground. This violent infighting coincided with the Kennedy administration's aggressive crackdown on organized crime. With federal pressure mounting, the Mafia, which thrived in the shadows, was thrust into the public spotlight. Yet, instead of uniting against their common adversary, they continued to battle over territory, money, and respect. The decade was marked by significant losses for the Mafia's old guard. Charlie "Lucky" Luciano, the architect of the modern syndicate, died in 1962. In the same year, just a few months later, Joe Profaci passed away. Meanwhile, the infamous Joey Gallo found himself imprisoned for 14 years in 1961. Amid this turmoil, Joe Bonanno attempted a bold coup to seize control of New York's crime families by eliminating Gambino, Lucchese, and others. Believing he could count on Joseph Magliocco and Joe Colombo as allies, Bonanno severely underestimated Colombo's allegiance to the established order. Colombo exposed the plot, solidifying his own position as boss and earning the respect of the Mafia hierarchy. But his ascent was anything but smooth, as the fallout from these betrayals placed many key players under intense scrutiny, especially during the high-profile revelations of 1963. This backdrop sets the stage for one of the most enigmatic and relentless figures in Mafia history, Sonny Franzese. A high-ranking member of the Colombo crime family, Franzese embodied the ruthless commitment of a man who lived and breathed the Mafia's unyielding code of silence. Never one to betray its secrets, he stayed loyal to life, no matter the cost. Yet the price of his devotion was steep, and it devastated his family. Sonny Franzese's story is one of stark contrasts. An individual who thrived in the dark world of organized crime, yet whose personal life was marred by tragedy and betrayal. His son, Michael Franzese, would later rise to prominence as one of the most well-known figures discussing Mafia history on platforms like YouTube. Michael Franzese, a man who once walked the razor's edge of the Mafia, managed to turn his life around in a way that few could imagine. He was a sharp individual, astute in the ways of the world and the inner workings of the mob. But his story was shaped in the late 1970s and 1980s, a time when New York was no longer the city it once was. The men he rubbed shoulders with were hardened killers, the streets were darker, and the corruption around him was so deep it could make men millions. But no amount of money could shield him from the inevitable. Michael and his father, Sonny Franzese, would both face prison time. Sonny, the stalwart Mafia figure who adhered to the code of omertà no matter the circumstances, would spend much of his life behind bars, even when one of his sons testified against him. Sonny never wavered from the silence that was expected of him. Meanwhile, Michael's life took a different turn. His time in the mob would eventually be replaced with a different kind of journey, one of redemption and change. The pressure from newspapers, the relentless pursuit of the FBI, and the scrutiny from the government would eventually take its toll on the Franzese family. The weight of this pressure, combined with the crackdown on organized crime, brought down their criminal syndicate. Michael still denies many of the accusations leveled against him and his father, holding on to a part of their legacy despite the consequences. But what this story truly illustrates is the force that Kennedy's administration unleashed on the Mafia. If it could destroy Sonny Franzese and his operation, one of the most powerful in the country, it was clear that nothing would be left untouched. This wasn't just a fight against one man or one family. It was an all-out war on the very foundations of organized crime. The systemic dismantling of their empire was underway, and unless something drastic was done, everything these men had built would be torn down in a single administration. The impact was crushing, and the effects reverberated throughout the Mafia. The stakes were higher than ever before. As you hear this gripping account, it becomes evident just how monumental the Kennedy administration's actions were, shaping the future of both the criminal underworld and the political landscape for decades to come. On June 6, 1962, the world of organized crime in Queens was rocked by a shocking indictment. Two men, John Sonny Franzese, 43, and Frank Giampoli, 33, were arrested following a sweeping investigation by the Queens County District Attorney's Office. The charges against them were as audacious as they were bizarre, using terror tactics, mice, bees, and female enforcers to extort beauty parlor owners. The operation, allegedly targeting Queens' 1,200 beauty shops, was disguised as a unionization drive. Franzese, a reputed lieutenant in the Colombo crime family, underboss Joseph Profaci, and Giampoli, an enforcer, were accused of coercing beauty shop owners for $5,000 each as insurance against labor peace. Their tactics included releasing mice onto shop floors to scare patrons and introducing bees into coffee containers. The district attorney's office revealed that the conspiracy extended into other areas of racketeering, including narcotics and gambling. At their arraignment, the case attracted significant attention. Francis Smith, head of the district attorney's rackets bureau, stated that the investigation had wider implications, with the FBI, Treasury agents, and local authorities collaborating on the case. The defendants, however, pleaded not guilty, and both were held on $2,500 bail by Judge Alfred Bosch. Franzese's arrest was made at his $40,000 home in Roslyn, Long Island, while Giampoli was taken into custody at his residence in Hollis, Queens. However, the tides turned swiftly. Just 3 months later, on September 5, 1962, the charges were dismissed. In a stunning legal reversal, State Supreme Court Justice Peter Farrell ruled that the grand jury indictment lacked sufficient evidence of fear and force, critical elements for a conviction in any extortion case. The prosecution's evidence was insufficient to support claims that the actions of Franzese and Giampoli had created the necessary level of intimidation. Justice Farrell's ruling effectively ended the legal battle, with both men walking free. The dismissal, following a motion by their defense attorney Jacques Schiffer, left the public and law enforcement communities stunned, with the case reflecting both the audacity of the crime and the complexities of proving extortion within the underworld. This brief yet intense chapter in the criminal saga surrounding Sonny Franzese was yet another reminder of the shifting dynamics within New York's mafia scene. Despite the dramatic arrest and courtroom drama, Franzese's story, like so many others in the world of organized crime, would continue to unfold under the shadow of his mob affiliations. Then, on the morning of June the 6th, 1962, the quiet allure of suburban Long Island was shattered by a bombshell report in Newsday. Written by the relentless Bob Greene, the article unveiled an alarming truth that was hard to ignore. Beneath the manicured lawns and white picket fences of Nassau and Suffolk counties, a sinister underworld was thriving. Greene painted a chilling portrait of organized crime, not just infiltrating, but carving up the idyllic suburbs into zones of illicit control. At the helm of this nefarious empire, he alleged, were three crime overlords, men who didn't just exist in the shadows, but thrived there, orchestrating a criminal machine that stretched across the nation. These weren't your run-of-the-mill street thugs. Greene's report described them as generals commanding an elite army of hoodlums, men trained not just to steal or extort, but to blend in seamlessly with their surroundings. They were the new face of organized crime, a far cry from the gun-toting gangsters of the Prohibition era. And their reach. It was vast, stretching from gambling dens hidden in suburban basements to rackets so sophisticated they could siphon wealth from the prosperous suburbs without leaving a trace. But what hit hardest wasn't just the breadth of their operations. It was the shocking revelation that the police already knew who many of these mobsters were. Greene claimed that law enforcement in Nassau and Suffolk had long since identified these criminal players, even rounding up a few suspects the night before. Yet, despite this knowledge, the police were fighting a losing battle, hamstrung by inadequate funding and a crippling shortage of manpower. The implication was clear. While the mob was gearing up for a takeover, local officials were fumbling in the dark, ill-equipped to combat the growing menace. The article called for action, a rallying cry to the leaders of Nassau and Suffolk counties. Greene demanded they step up and confront the underworld's stranglehold on Long Island. Without immediate intervention, he warned, the idyllic suburbs could soon become a haven for crime, their wealth exploited by men who lived above the law. And yet, as the ink dried on Greene's damning exposé, there was one name conspicuously absent from the article, a name whispered in the halls of law enforcement and muttered with fear among those who dared to challenge the Colombo crime family: Sonny Franzese. On June 6, 1962, Newsday delivered a gripping account of a massive police crackdown on Long Island's underworld, as 85 detectives launched a daring operation, questioning notorious figures linked to the national crime syndicate. The roundup targeted 30 known hoodlums, with 13 brought in for questioning, including high-profile mobsters like Salvatore Musacchio, Michael Clemente, and Joseph Lanza. The raid, sparked by revelations from imprisoned mobster Joseph Valachi, unraveled the syndicate's deep-rooted influence across Long Island. As law enforcement stepped up its fight against organized crime, the operation highlighted the powerful grip of the Mafia, encompassing everything from bookmaking to labor racketeering, in one of the largest police efforts in Nassau County's history. A squad of 85 detectives visited the homes of 30 known hoodlums last night, bringing 13 of them in for questioning by the district attorney about the operations of syndicated crime on Long Island. 2 other men, one of them the owner of Long Island's largest catering house, were also brought in for questioning. Neither had a criminal record, and Nassau District Attorney Khan clarified that they were asked only for any information they might have on cases under investigation. Khan stated that he plans to question 17 hoodlums, many of whom were not at home last night, along with at least one other witness, over the next 3 days. 5 of those individuals were scheduled to appear at Khan's office with their lawyers at 2 in the afternoon today. Last night, the anteroom of the district attorney's office in the county courthouse resembled a reenactment of the infamous 1957 gangland meeting in Appalachian, New York. 10 mobsters, including prominent figures such as Long Island policy boss Salvatore, Sally the Sheik, Musacchio, East River crime boss Michael, Black Mike, Clemente, and peer extortionist Joseph Sox Lanza, sat sullenly on straight-backed wooden chairs, avoiding each other's sidelong glances as reporters and television cameras captured the scene. Khan later informed the press that the mobsters, who were brought in under request subpoenas, had been questioned about the disappearance of garbage racketeer Vincent Squillante and the recent murder of union organizer Edward Jimmy Lynch in New Hyde Park. He explained that the raid was prompted by recent revelations regarding the national crime syndicate labeled Cosa Nostra, Our Thing. These revelations, including the information that 3 of the 12 national rulers of the syndicate reside on Long Island, were disclosed to the United States Department of Justice by jailed mobster Joseph Valachi of New York. "We wanted to know why these men came to Long Island and just what plans the crime syndicate has for this area," Khan said. He mentioned that all of the men questioned last night either refused to answer questions or denied knowing Joseph Valachi or having any involvement with the syndicate. "The information we got was not particularly helpful," Khan admitted, "but it served to warn these men that we know they are here, and we are going to keep an eye on them. If this knowledge saves just one Nassau citizen from being victimized by these men, the entire roundup will have been worthwhile." Joseph Musacchio, who is married to the niece of Magliocco, a man named as one of the national syndicate bosses, hid his face from photographers as he entered the courthouse lobby in Islip. A beefy, unidentified companion of Musacchio, sporting 2 black eyes behind a pair of sunglasses, threatened to punch a Newsday reporter and then raced from the courthouse with his suit jacket over his head. Another hoodlum, Luis Bongiorno, was asked by reporters if he knew Joseph Valachi, who reportedly has a $100,000 gangland price on his head. "I don't know him," laughed Bongiorno, "but I'd sure like a piece of those $100,000. The only hoodlum to arrive with a lawyer was labor extortionist John Dio Guardi of Point Lookout, who was just 3 months out of prison. Dio, dressed in a black suit, appeared frightened. Detectives reported that Dio's lawyer, prominent Long Beach Republican Bruno Barata, was at Dio's home when they arrived. Khan stated that Dio refused to answer all questions. In contrast to Dio was Lorenzo Chappie Brescia, a former bodyguard to the deceased Vice King Charles, Lucky Luciano. Brescia arrived smiling broadly, raising his hand in salute, while others appeared tight-lipped and defiant. The raids, which involved homes and businesses in Nassau, Suffolk, Queens, Brooklyn, and the Bronx, revealed that more than 40 mobsters now reside in Nassau County alone. While some of the hoodlums live in other counties, they are believed to be involved in criminal activities with mobsters based in Nassau County. The identities of those apprehended and those sought indicated that ongoing investigations involve bookmaking and labor racketeering cases. A surprise witness brought in by detectives last night was Thomas Mano of Tappan Town Lane, Brookville, owner of the Huntington Townhouse. Mano, who has no prior police record, was questioned about possible alleged associates. Mano denied knowing the individuals he was questioned about and, upon leaving Khan's office, told newsmen, "It's a disgrace pulling someone in for this." Another person classified as a witness was Michael Adamo of North Chestnut Street, North Massapequa, who also has no prior police record. Khan reported that Adamo was questioned about possible relatives in the Long Island area. Adamo denied being related to the men he was asked about. 4 of the top men detectives sought last night were not home. These included Carlo Gambino of Club Drive, Massapequa, named as another of the syndicate's national leaders, Queen's rackets boss Michael Miranda of Forest Hills, Long Island bookmaking czar John Sonny Franzese, and Dominic Joe Pitts Petito of Brooklyn, believed by New York police to be the successor to murdered executioner Albert Anastasia on the Brooklyn Syndicate piers. The roundup, described by Khan as the largest police operation in county history, began at 8:40 at night and concluded at 3:30 in the morning. Among those apprehended were Frank Sherbicki of Elmont, a convicted armed longshoreman questioned about Albert Squillante; Salvatore Badalmente of Mineola Avenue, Point Lookout, a convicted robber and bookmaker who owns a Brooklyn fuel oil company. He was questioned about his connections with Magliocco and other syndicate members; Peter Caracas of Mellow Lane, Jericho, a convicted policy banker and dope peddler involved in Long Island bookmaking operations; Salvatore Musacchio of Murdoch Avenue, Wanta, who has 22 arrests and multiple policy convictions; Luis Bongiorno of Chestnut Road, Manhasset, a convicted counterfeiter and bookmaker with ties to John Franzese; John Dio Guardi of Audrey Street, Point Lookout, a thrice-convicted labor extortionist and syndicate enforcer; Alfred Faccio of Latimer Court, Rockville Center, a convicted killer with 2 homicide arrests. Other arrests included Lorenzo Chappie Brescia, Dominic Schiaffone, Vincent Mirabella, and Michael Black Mike Clemente, all connected to syndicate operations involving gambling, extortion, and labor racketeering. Clemente, the boss of the East River waterfront rackets, was described as a top mobster and friend to some of Long Island's most prominent hoodlums. The operation shed light on the widespread influence of the syndicate, highlighting its stronghold across multiple counties and its involvement in everything from labor racketeering to bookmaking and extortion. On August 21, 1963, Newsday reported on the chilling murder of Anthony Little Augie Carfano and his companion, Janice Drake, whose bodies were discovered in a parked car in Jackson Heights. Investigators revealed that 3 individuals were seen with Carfano and Drake before their deaths, including John Sonny Franzese, a key figure in Long Island's gambling scene. Franzese, said to have been assigned control of the area's gambling operations by Joseph Magliocco, quickly became a central figure in the investigation. Despite numerous leads, including testimony from notorious mob informant Joseph Valachi, the true motive behind the murder remained elusive. As the inquiry unfolded, it became clear that Valachi's forthcoming testimony might hold the key to unlocking more secrets of the underworld, further intensifying the probe into the Mafia's grip on Long Island. A spokesman for Queens District Attorney Frank O'Connor revealed yesterday that 3 individuals were reportedly present with Anthony Little Augie Pisano Carfano and Mrs. Janice Drake at a Jackson Heights motel before the pair were found slain in a parked car. One of the individuals has been tentatively identified as John Sonny Franzese of Shrub Road, Herricks, while the identities of the other 2 remain undisclosed. It was also disclosed that Franzese has been assigned control of Long Island gambling operations by his boss, Joseph Magliocco. O'Connor dismissed as ridiculous a published report claiming that Little Augie dined with racketeer Frank Costello on the night of the murders. The spokesman for O'Connor announced plans to meet with United States Attorney General Robert Kennedy and other Justice Department officials in Washington to gather any information Joseph Valachi might have concerning the 1959 slaying of Little Augie. Despite Valachi's numerous revelations as a mobster turned informer, his testimony has yet to shed light on this particular gangland execution. Meanwhile, in Washington, Senator John McClellan of Arkansas stated he visited Fort Monmouth, New Jersey on Sunday to meet with Valachi, referred to as the number 1 canary of the underworld. McClellan noted that Valachi provided enough information about organized crime to keep Senate investigators occupied for some time. However, he declined to disclose the details of Valachi's revelations, citing the need for further verification. Valachi's appearance before the Senate Racket Subcommittee, tentatively scheduled for the following month, may need to be postponed, according to McClellan. The senator described Valachi as the most valuable witness and emphasized the significance of his testimony. Valachi remains under heavy guard at Fort Monmouth to prevent potential underworld attempts on his life. McClellan's visit to the base sparked speculation, particularly when it was reported that the base's airfield was under unusually tight security during the arrival and departure of a plane carrying McClellan, 2 subcommittee staff members, and Deputy Attorney General William Hundley. This led to conjecture about Valachi being transferred to another location for his protection. McClellan described his meeting with Valachi as a get-acquainted session, noting that Valachi appeared friendly, cooperative, and generally willing to talk. However, he also observed that Valachi was a bit reserved and not making any wild exaggerations. "I think I was impressed that he appeared to be telling the truth," McClellan said. A source close to the subcommittee characterized the interaction as preliminary, with McClellan doing most of the listening, while Valachi refrained from delving into deeper discussions. The source added, "They will meet again later, and then it will be in the nature of a real interrogation." Valachi is expected to provide critical information to the subcommittee, not revealing everything he knows but offering enough to significantly advance the investigation into organized crime. The spotlight on Valachi's testimony coincides with growing speculation about the involvement of John, Sonny, Franzese in the 1959 killing of Little Augie, further entwining the investigation with Long Island's criminal underworld. On August 21, 1963, Newsday uncovered a jaw-dropping revelation that sent shockwaves through both the criminal underworld and the corridors of power. Salvatore Momo Giancana, the notorious Midwest crime boss, had once served as an unexpected informant for the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA. In a twist that would have shaken the Mafia to its core, it was revealed that during the volatile days of the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Giancana was approached by the CIA to provide crucial intelligence on Fidel Castro's rise to power. His connections to Cuban mobsters, who had once controlled Havana's thriving casinos, gave him access to invaluable information. Information the CIA was desperate to obtain as Castro's regime took hold. This revelation posed a direct threat to organized crime, as it exposed the links between the Mafia and the US government at a time when most mobsters were fiercely protective of their operations, especially those tied to Cuba. The Mafia's operations on the island were now in jeopardy, and the exposure of such high-level connections to the CIA was devastating. For figures like Carlos Marcello, the writing was on the wall. Secrets once kept in the shadows were now being printed in the press for all to see. The very foundations of the Mafia's power were beginning to crack. Giancana's involvement with the CIA was part of a larger, darker story of how the government and organized crime intersected at critical moments in history. In the late 1950s, as Castro's forces pushed the Batista regime out of power, the CIA saw Giancana's mob connections as a potential gateway to intelligence on the unfolding political situation in Cuba. For several months, Giancana reportedly provided information through his criminal network, positioning himself as a key player in the Cold War intelligence game. But while he may have seen this as a way to gain favor and reduce the heat from federal investigations, it seems to have only worsened his situation. Despite his cooperation with the CIA, federal scrutiny of Giancana's criminal empire continued unabated. In fact, 2 months prior, he had sought legal relief from the FBI's surveillance, claiming it violated his privacy. Though a brief ruling temporarily restricted the FBI's monitoring efforts, the decision was quickly overturned, and the FBI's pursuit of Giancana resumed. His efforts to engage with the CIA, like those of another infamous mobster, Charles "Lucky" Luciano, who had cooperated with the military during World War II, seemed to backfire. Luciano's cooperation with the armed forces had been shrouded in controversy, and his eventual deportation to Italy came after years of denials and political maneuvering. Giancana's ties to the CIA revealed the complex and sometimes contradictory relationships between organized crime and government agencies. Though his motivations remain unclear, some speculate he was trying to gain leverage over his FBI tormentors. This brief period of collaboration added yet another layer of intrigue to his already murky life. The exposure of his involvement with the CIA not only exposed the depths of organized crime's influence, but also highlighted the dangerous game being played between the government and the Mafia during a turbulent time in American history. For those at the top of the criminal world, this was not just an inconvenience. It was a direct threat to everything they had built. On August 21, 1963, Newsday reported that Suffolk County authorities were intensifying their crackdown on organized crime, with a new strategy focused on dismantling the expanding syndicate influence on Long Island. A high-level meeting at police headquarters brought together key figures like District Attorney Smith and Assistant District Attorney John Fay to strategize the next phase of the investigation. This effort followed previous raids targeting the warring factions of Brooklyn's Profaci-Gallo feud and a gambling operation in Huntington linked to mobsters attempting to buy police protection. With the investigation now focusing on mob-run gambling operations and the murder of Louis Mariani, attention turned to figures like Sonny Franzese, who was reportedly given control of Long Island's gambling activities by Cosa Nostra boss Joseph Magliocco. Meanwhile, the county's fight against organized crime gained further momentum with the appointment of James Catterson Jr. as a new assistant district attorney, signaling a more coordinated and aggressive approach to combating the Mafia's grip on the region. Top Suffolk County strategists convened at police headquarters today to plan a new phase in their crackdown on organized crime. Suffolk District Attorney Smith announced that Assistant District Attorney John Fay, head of the Rackets Bureau, would meet with Police Commissioner John Barry, Chief Inspector Cyril Donnelly, and Chief of Detectives O'Ray Edwards to chart the next steps in combating mob activities on Long Island. District Attorney Smith stated that efforts have so far focused on rounding up members and associates of the warring Profaci-Gallo factions from Brooklyn. These efforts aim to gather intelligence on the recent murder of Louis Mariani, a Gallo gang member, and to prevent Suffolk County from becoming a battlefield in their violent feud. The next phase of the investigation will target syndicate-controlled gambling operations, which are reportedly expanding into Suffolk County. Smith highlighted an April raid on a mob-run gambling house in Huntington, where police and the Rackets Bureau uncovered attempts by top mobsters to buy police protection. That case, involving bribery charges against 7 suspects, is now awaiting trial. Smith also noted strong evidence of a broader mob initiative to take control of Suffolk's bookmaking and policy gambling activities. The ongoing investigation into Mariani's murder in Port Jefferson Station will continue, alongside efforts to address the organized crime elements behind gambling enterprises. Though Smith did not disclose specifics about the mob gambling probe, sources revealed that Sonny Franzese of Roslyn is under intense scrutiny. Underworld reports suggest that Joseph Magliocco, a Cosa Nostra boss from East Islip, has entrusted Franzese with control of all Long Island gambling operations. In a related announcement, Smith introduced 33-year-old James Catterson Jr. of Belle Terre as the first of 4 assistant district attorneys authorized by the County Board of Supervisors to combat mob activities and address the rising criminal caseload. Catterson, a former Assistant State Attorney General and Assistant United States Attorney, brings significant experience to the role. Notably, in 1961, he prosecuted Carmine Persico Jr., a Profaci gang hitman from Hempstead. In another development, the New York Daily News reported today that Joseph Valachi, the notorious syndicate gangster turned informer, was secretly transferred over the weekend from Fort Monmouth, New Jersey, to a jail in Washington, D.C. Valachi, 61, is expected to testify before a Senate subcommittee soon. Officials at Fort Monmouth and the Justice Department declined to comment on the report. and jail authorities in Washington stated that they had no prisoner by the name of Valachi. As Suffolk County ramps up its efforts against organized crime, the combined pressure of local, state, and federal investigations marks a pivotal moment in the fight against the syndicate's growing influence on Long Island. On September 21, 1963, Newsday reported a significant development in Suffolk County's crackdown on organized crime, as investigators closed in on Long Island's gambling operations. Albert Mayone, a convicted bookmaker from New York City, was interrogated by Assistant District Attorney John Fay, who was leading the investigation into Sonny Franzese's extensive gambling network across the region. Mayone, who had claimed to be out of work for nearly a year, was suspected of having close ties to Franzese, including running a gas station that doubled as a hub for bookmaking activities. Despite Mayone's insistence that he was merely visiting friends, investigators remained skeptical, and plans to question other Franzese associates, including Lawrence Abandano, were set in motion. As law enforcement stepped up its efforts, Suffolk Police Commissioner John Barry also announced the formation of a new homicide squad, further intensifying the focus on organized crime across the county. The investigation signaled a growing determination to dismantle the mob's grip on Long Island's illicit gambling scene. A convicted bookmaker, claiming to have been out of work for nearly a year, met with Suffolk Rackets Bureau investigators yesterday, but the purpose of the meeting wasn't to help him find a job. Instead, investigators were keen to uncover any connections he might have to reputed Long Island gambling czar Sonny Franzese. Albert Mayone, 42, a convicted bookmaker from New York City, who listed his address as 15 Boulevard Avenue, West Islip, was interrogated at length by Assistant District Attorney John Fay, head of Suffolk's Rackets Bureau. Fay has stated that his ongoing investigation into mob-linked activities in Suffolk County is focusing on Franzese, who is reportedly in charge of gambling and policy operations across Long Island. Mayone admitted during questioning that he is a close personal friend of Franzese, but claimed he has been unemployed since suffering a heart attack last November. At the time, Mayone was reportedly operating a gas station in Jamaica that Franzese financed. Fay described the station as a drop for bookmaking and policy slips. When pressed about his daily train trips to Brooklyn over the past year, Mayone insisted he was merely visiting friends and looking for a job. Skeptical, Fay asked, "Every day for a year?" Mayone, complaining of heart strain during the questioning, nodded in affirmation. Fay openly accused him of lying. A scheduled meeting between Fay and Lawrence Abandano, another known associate of Franzese, was postponed until Monday. Fay is determined to interview all suspected links to Franzese, either voluntarily or forcibly, before bringing Franzese himself in for questioning. Salvatore Esposito, 32, a small-time criminal and another figure of interest in the investigation, pleaded not guilty at his arraignment in county court yesterday in Riverhead. Esposito, who resides at 384 South 16th Street, Lindenhurst, is facing charges of first-degree grand larceny and issuing a fraudulent check. According to Fay, Franzese was handpicked by reputed Cosa Nostra leader Joseph, Fat Man, Magliocco of Islip, to oversee organized gambling operations across Long Island. In a related development, Suffolk Police Commissioner John Barry announced the reassignment of 28 detectives and patrolmen effective Monday. These officers will staff the county's first dedicated homicide squad and bolster the intelligence, gambling, narcotics, and district attorneys' squads. Captain Patrick Mellon, commander of the second squad, has been tasked with leading and training the new 11-man homicide unit, which will handle all investigations into deaths and suicides in the county. This intensified focus on organized crime, coupled with strengthened law enforcement resources, marks a significant escalation in Suffolk County's efforts to dismantle gambling and mob-related operations. On September 24, 1963, Newsday covered the high-stakes drama surrounding Joseph Valachi, a former mobster-turned-informer, as he prepared to testify before the Senate subcommittee on organized crime. With his life in imminent danger from the Mafia for breaking its code of silence, Valachi had made a deadly bargain. His inside knowledge of the Cosa Nostra in exchange for federal protection. The hearings, set to begin the next day, were expected to reveal critical details about the Mafia's inner workings, though Valachi had already shared much of this information with law enforcement. His public testimony was a historic moment, as it would directly challenge the Mafia's code and potentially spark new legislative efforts to combat organized crime. With maximum security surrounding his every move, the hearings promised to be a defining chapter in the government's war against the syndicate, with the potential to disrupt its powerful influence across the nation. A tense and extraordinary bargain is reaching its dramatic climax in Washington, as the federal government races against time to keep Joseph Valachi, a former underworld operative, alive. Believing himself to be a marked man by the crime syndicate known as Cosa Nostra, Valachi has traded his inside knowledge of the Mafia's inner workings for federal protection. For the first time since becoming an informer, Valachi will step onto a public stage to testify before the Senate Investigations Subcommittee on Organized Crime. The hearings, set to begin tomorrow, are open to the public on a first-come, first-served basis, and notably, spectators will not be searched for weapons. Currently under maximum security guard at a federal installation in the Washington area, Valachi's exact travel arrangements to the Senate office building are shrouded in secrecy. The route he will take, the number of unmarked FBI cars escorting him, the entrance he will use, and the corridors he will traverse, all are closely guarded details. Once inside the Senate caucus room, Valachi will be surrounded by an undisclosed number of FBI agents in plain clothes, mixed among uniformed police officers and the audience. "We don't expect a black limousine to come along with a sawed-off shotgun popping out," said a Justice Department official, before pausing to add ominously, "But we don't know." For the past year, Valachi has cooperated with the Justice Department, divulging critical details about Cosa Nostra in exchange for protection. Although his testimony before the Senate subcommittee is not expected to reveal anything beyond what he has already shared with law enforcement, his appearance carries immense significance. Officials cite two key reasons why Valachi's life is in grave danger. Potential legislative fallout. His testimony could lead to new laws aimed at curbing Cosa Nostra's activities, posing a direct threat to the syndicate. Breaking the code of silence. By publicly discrediting the Mafia's strict code that a talkative man is a dead man, Valachi has made himself a target for retaliation. Valachi, already serving a life sentence for murder, will return to federal custody under maximum security after his testimony. Officials acknowledge that the Senate hearing may be the Mafia's only opportunity to silence him. "This may be their only chance," one official grimly remarked. In a related development, 3 of Nassau County's top law enforcement officials are flying to Washington tonight to meet personally with Jerome Adlerman, Chief Majority Counsel to the Senate Subcommittee. The delegation includes District Attorney Khan, Rackets Bureau Chief Norman Levy, and Police Inspector James Farrell. As the nation watches this high-stakes drama unfold, the Valachi hearings mark a pivotal moment in the government's battle against organized crime, with the potential to expose the Cosa Nostra's operations and disrupt its grip on American society. On September 24, 1963, Newsday reported that Suffolk County's ongoing crackdown on organized crime was having a significant impact on local mobsters, with some expressing plans to leave the area in response to increased law enforcement pressure. Luis Abandando, a convicted gambler, hinted he might return to Brooklyn due to the constant police presence, echoing the sentiments of others like Lorenzo Lampassi, who had also relocated. Investigators, led by Assistant District Attorney John Fay, continued their intense questioning of suspected associates of John "Sonny" Franzese, focusing on his control over Long Island's gambling operations. The investigation uncovered connections to prominent mob figures, including Salvatore "Sally" the Sheik Musacchio, and intensified with the involvement of the state liquor authority in revoking licenses from bars tied to Franzese. As authorities sought to dismantle these operations, the spectre of protection rackets and mob-related shakedowns loomed large over local businesses, underscoring the deep-rooted influence of organized crime in the region. If Suffolk County's ongoing crackdown on organized crime has achieved one thing, it's made some mobsters feel unwelcome. Yesterday, another hoodlum expressed plans to leave the area. Luis Abandando, 35, a convicted gambler residing at 4 Boulevard Avenue, West Islip, hinted during an interview with Assistant District Attorney John Fay that he might return to Brooklyn. Fay, head of the county's Rackets Bureau, has been leading an extensive roundup and questioning of known criminals. "It's too expensive living out here, and all these cops poking around make it tough on the family and kids," Abandando reportedly told Fay. "When I came out here, I thought it was a good place to live for the kids. Now I think maybe I'll move back. You want me out of here anyhow." Abandando's comments echo sentiments shared last month by Lorenzo "Larry" Lampassi Jr., an associate of the Gallo gang. Lampassi decided to leave his $19,000 ranch house at 42 Seneca Drive, Comac, citing the constant presence of police surveillance vehicles. Fay called Abandando in for questioning about his gambling activities and his ties to John "Sonny" Franzese, the reputed Long Island gambling czar. It was alleged that Franzese had given Abandando a piece of Suffolk's gambling operations, though Abandando denied any gambling activity in the area. He did, however, admit to being a gambler, saying, "That's how I lost my cabaret license in New York." Fay clarified that Abandando's license was revoked after he attempted to bribe a New York City police officer during a dice game at the Flamboyant restaurant in Queens Village, where he worked until February. Abandando also defended Franzese, telling Fay, "You've got him all wrong. He's not out here to do that stuff. He just likes the country and seeing his friends." Fay noted Abandando's notorious lineage, mentioning that his father, Frank, the Dasher Abandando, was electrocuted in 1942 alongside Happy Maione in a murder Incan case. Interestingly, Happy Maione was the uncle of Albert Maione, a 42-year-old gambler from West Islip who was interviewed by Fay the previous Friday. Both men are close friends, neighbors, and described by Fay as Franzese's boys in Suffolk. Another figure questioned was 53-year-old Joseph Vito, who resides at 633 Conklin Street, Farmingdale. Vito, who owns a $35,000 home, 2 luxury cars, and a $19,000 mortgage on the Bella Napoli restaurant in Mineola, admitted to being a close associate of Franzese, but denied involvement in Long Island gambling operations. Claiming to operate a legitimate business in Long Beach that grosses $700 a week, with 50% clear profit, Vito told Fay he was framed in an ongoing Nassau County indictment, accusing him of masterminding a protection racket targeting barbershops. "I don't do such things," Vito asserted, while admitting that he had seen Franzese maybe 1,000 times in the last 10 years. "Why shouldn't I? He's a friend, and he used to come into my place, the Bella Napoli, all the time when I ran it." Fay linked Vito to other prominent underworld figures, including Salvatore, Sally the Sheik, Musacchio of Wanta. Vito, however, denied any wrongdoing. "I know them all, but I haven't done anything wrong," he insisted. Fay noted that Vito was previously convicted in 1935 for violating federal alcohol tax laws. Fay indicated that additional hoodlums operating in Suffolk would be summoned for interviews today as authorities continue to tighten their grip on organized crime in the area. These efforts are part of a broader strategy to expose and disrupt the networks connected to Franzese and other influential figures in the syndicate. In Baldwin, Long Island, a man with ties to the underworld has surfaced, drawing attention from both authorities and the public. This individual, whose identity remains undisclosed but is described as a former informant against Vito Genovese, is reportedly hiding out while fearing retribution from the mob. Recognizable by his eye patch, he keeps his one good eye vigilantly scanning for underworld soldati, the foot soldiers he believes are hunting for him. Sandy Moore, a former police officer turned jukebox racketeer, gained notoriety after he turned state's evidence against a judge he had attempted to bribe. Although his testimony earned him a reduced sentence of just 1 year in jail, Moore has since returned to Long Island. Recently released, he initially began peddling coin-operated pool tables to local bars. However, Moore's brief return to normalcy was interrupted when Lockport, New York, police apprehended him on charges of grand larceny. Meanwhile, the State Liquor Authority, SLA, has revoked the licenses of 5 Nassau County bars, citing alleged connections to Sonny Franzese, a reputed figure in organized crime. The SLA's action underscores suspicions that Franzese has a stake in these establishments, raising alarms about the extent of his influence. Following the SLA's crackdown, Franzese's associates are reportedly exploiting the situation to run a shakedown racket. The scheme unfolds as Franzese's men approach bar owners, demanding payoff money in exchange for protection. Their threats include the promise that if the owners refuse, Franzese himself will become a regular patron of their establishment, a veiled warning about the consequences of defying the syndicate. The activities of Franzese's crew harken back to the gangster era of the 1930s, with henchmen and protection rackets reappearing in the lexicon. The implications of such schemes are a stark reminder of the pervasive grip organized crime continues to exert on small businesses and local communities. As authorities work to dismantle these operations, Baldwin's uneasy undercurrent of mob activity remains a point of focus, with figures like Franzese and Moore at the center of growing scrutiny. On December 31, 1963, Newsday reported the death of Joseph Magliocco, the 65-year-old boss of Long Island's Cosa Nostra faction, from a heart attack. His passing marked the end of a turbulent chapter in the Mafia's history and sparked immediate speculation about his successor. Magliocco, who had led the Brooklyn Long Island family since 1962, faced intense pressure from both rival factions and the Mafia's ruling commission, who had recently forced his retirement due to his failure to manage internal conflicts, including the violent Gallo Gang war. His health problems and inability to secure peace within his ranks had weakened his hold on power, leading to his downfall. As authorities speculated on who would take the reins of the family, attention turned to Sonny Franzese and Carlo Gambino as the most likely successors. Franzese, a rising star known for his control over gambling operations, and Gambino, a seasoned and influential mafia leader, were both seen as strong candidates to fill the power vacuum. However, Magliocco's death also highlighted the volatility of mafia succession, with potential rivalries threatening to erupt as different factions jostled for control. This event underscored the shifting dynamics of organized crime on Long Island, with Magliocco's demise marking a pivotal moment in the underworld's power struggles. Joseph Magliocco, a prominent figure in the Cosa Nostra and Long Island's underworld czar, has died of a heart attack at the age of 65. His death, which occurred late Saturday night, was only revealed yesterday, triggering immediate speculation among police and mob watchers about his successor and the potential for new power struggles within the Mafia. Magliocco's death comes as reports surfaced that his 2-year tenure as the Brooklyn Long Island Cosa Nostra family leader had already ended. Authorities have been investigating claims that the Mafia's ruling board, known as the Commission, recently forced Magliocco into retirement. According to police intelligence, this move may have been part of a broader effort to broker peace between Magliocco's faction and the rebellious Gallo Gang, whose violent feud had destabilized the family. In the Mafia hierarchy, a family is a regional criminal organization answerable to a boss, and Magliocco's inability to maintain order within his ranks was seen as a critical failure. Even in death, Magliocco proved elusive to law enforcement. He passed away at 11:30 at night, but police only learned of his death at 3:30 the following afternoon. Suffolk medical examiner Dr. Sidney Weinberg revealed that a deputy, Dr. Peter Zavalis, certified Magliocco's death without notifying authorities because he didn't know the significance of the name. Magliocco was scheduled to be buried today at St. Charles Cemetery in North Lindenhurst, following services at St. Mary's Catholic Church in East Islip. Sources close to the investigation suggest that Magliocco had been preparing to fight for his leadership against rival underworld families. He commanded one of the largest stables of professional killers outside of Chicago and reportedly threatened to fight on the streets if necessary to secure his position. However, his declining health, including diabetes and a heart condition, coupled with mounting pressure from the commission, led to his retreat. Last month, he backed down from his threats when the commission ordered his retirement. The decision was reportedly based on several factors. Peace with the Gallo gang. The Gallo faction agreed to end their violent feud with Magliocco's family in exchange for new leadership. Unwanted attention. The commission sought to reduce police scrutiny following high-profile murders, such as the August killing of Gallo associate Louis Mariani in Port Jefferson Station. Leadership failures. Magliocco's inability to control the gallows or broker compromises demonstrated weak leadership qualities. Contentious succession. Magliocco's takeover in 1962, following the death of his brother-in-law Joseph Profaci, lacked broad support from family members. Only select regime leaders were consulted, undermining his authority. A deadly miscalculation. Magliocco's decision to eliminate the Gallo gang by hiring hitman Carmine Persico backfired spectacularly, igniting a bloody gang war that further destabilized his power base. Magliocco ruled his crime empire like a feudal lord from a heavily guarded mansion on a 6-acre estate at 99 Bayview Avenue in East Islip. The property featured high gates guarded by fierce German shepherd dogs, with armed bodyguards patrolling the grounds. Despite his outward displays of power, Magliocco lived in constant fear during the Gallo War. Last summer he reportedly called local garages in East Islip, inquiring about installing a remote start device in his car that could be activated from his home, an apparent precaution against car bombs. His last significant public appearance occurred in August when the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office summoned him for an interview at police headquarters. Appearing frail and medicated, he told investigators, "I'm a sick man," and pleaded to be left alone. As speculation swirls about his successor, Magliocco's death marks the end of a controversial chapter in Cosa Nostra's history, leaving a power vacuum that could trigger new rivalries within the Mafia. Following the death of Joseph Magliocco, police believe the Cosa Nostra's ruling commission has appointed a successor to oversee the Brooklyn Long Island family. Speculation has centered on two prominent figures: John, Sonny, Franzese, a capo regime and rising star in the underworld, and Carlo Gambino, a seasoned family leader and commission member. Franzese, a protege of Magliocco, has been identified by authorities as Long Island's gambling kingpin. His sharp business acumen and slick gambling operations catapulted him to prominence within the Mafia. Informant Joseph Valachi recently described him as having a hand in everything, adding, "He's a real big man in gambling." Popular within the Cosa Nostra hierarchy, Franzese has a criminal record that includes 8 arrests for crimes ranging from rape to arson, though he has only been convicted once, for bookmaking. Despite his shadowy dealings, he has managed to maintain a veneer of legitimacy, being listed as a part owner of a Brooklyn cleaning business and 2 nightclubs. Carlo Gambino, based in Massapequa, is another strong contender. Described by a Senate committee as one of the leading mobsters in the United States, Gambino has long been a power player in organized crime. As a delegate at the infamous Appalachian Conference in 1957, Gambino solidified his reputation as a key figure in the Cosa Nostra. In recent years, Gambino attempted to assert control over the Nassau-Suffolk Building Trades Council, AFL-CIO, aiming to extend his influence into the Long Island Federation of Labor. Police believe Gambino may have been chosen by the commission as a temporary overseer of both his own family and the Brooklyn Long Island family. The least likely successor, according to authorities, is Salvatore, the Sheikh Musacchio of Wantar, Magliocco's underboss. Musacchio, appointed to his position due to familial ties to both Magliocco and Joseph Profaci, lacks the leadership qualities needed to command the family. His criminal record includes 22 arrests for crimes such as extortion, robbery, and impersonating a police officer. Magliocco's rise to power was marred by controversy and missteps. After assuming leadership in 1962 following the death of his brother-in-law Joseph Profaci, Magliocco faced resistance from both the commission and rival factions. His inability to manage the rebellious Gallo gang, combined with his decision to hire Carmine Persico to eliminate them, led to a bloody gang war that destabilized his position. Magliocco first gained notoriety on November 14, 1957, when he was apprehended at the Appalachian Crime Syndicate Conference. Convicted of conspiracy, he initially faced a 5-year prison sentence and a $10,000 fine, but the conviction was later overturned along with 19 other delegates. The fallout from the Appalachian raid created further problems for Magliocco. In 1958, the State Liquor Authority revoked the license for his Brooklyn beer distribution company, Sunland Beverage Corp., citing 6 operational violations and his failure to disclose a 1928 arrest in Ohio. Despite these setbacks, Magliocco retained power behind the scenes, controlling 2 Brooklyn-based firms, Arrow Linen Supply Co. and Alpine Wine and Liquor Corp., which supplied numerous bars, nightclubs, and restaurants in New York City. A sauna bath in Suffolk was reportedly owned and operated through his wife, Rose. Magliocco ruled his empire from a heavily fortified mansion on a 6-acre estate at 99 Bayview Avenue, East Islip. High gates, guarded by German shepherd dogs, and armed bodyguards ensured his safety. However, during the Gallo Gang War, Magliocco lived in constant fear. Last summer, he contacted local garages in East Islip, inquiring about installing a remote start device for his car that could be controlled from his home, likely a precaution against car bombs. Magliocco's last major public appearance occurred in August, when he was summoned by the Suffolk District Attorney's Office for an interview at police headquarters. A shadow of his former self, he appeared frail, speaking softly and frequently popping pills for gallbladder and heart conditions. "I'm a sick man," he told investigators, pleading to be left alone. With Magliocco's death, the power vacuum in the Brooklyn Long Island family sets the stage for potential rivalries and shifts in the Mafia's balance of power. Whether Franzese, Gambino, or another figure emerges as the next leader, the ripple effects of this transition will undoubtedly shape the Cosa Nostra's future on Long Island and beyond. John Sonny Franzese led a life carefully balanced between the quiet suburban tranquility of Roslyn and the ruthless operations of a Mafia kingpin. By day, he appeared as the picture of a successful businessman, with a sharp crew cut and a disciplined routine. However, his true nature was far from that of a corporate executive. Franzese was the mastermind behind one of the largest and most lucrative criminal empires on Long Island, controlling rackets across multiple counties. His rise within the Cosa Nostra was swift and strategic. At 45, he had already secured the position of underboss in the Profaci-Magliocco family, overseeing a sprawling network involved in bookmaking, extortion, and loan sharking, with his influence reaching into legitimate businesses. Despite his criminal dealings, Franzese maintained an impeccable public persona, carefully crafting his life to appear as a devoted husband and father. He attended church with his family, kept a pristine lawn, and was seen as a pillar of suburban normalcy by his neighbors. But behind closed doors, Franzese was a master of organized crime, using fear, negotiation, and his business acumen to maintain control over his empire. His ability to evade law enforcement was legendary. He maintained strict operational security, holding meetings on street corners to avoid bugging and using public phones to avoid wiretaps. His system of insulation, issuing orders through intermediaries, kept him several layers removed from the crimes he orchestrated, frustrating authorities who were unable to gather concrete evidence against him. Franzese's influence was not just confined to his criminal activities. He played a key role in maintaining peace among rival factions, such as during the Bloody Gallo Gang War. His shrewdness and loyalty within the family earned him respect, and as his boss, Joe Colombo, aged, Franzese was poised to take full control of the family. Despite his cold and calculating nature as a mobster, Franzese was seen by those close to him as disciplined and pragmatic, a family man who valued loyalty above all else. His ability to navigate the dangerous underworld while keeping his personal life intact made him both a feared and respected figure. As he continued to expand his criminal empire, Franzese maintained the delicate balance between his role as a mafia boss and his public life, ensuring that his family remained unaware of the full scope of his dangerous world. Almost every morning at 10:30, a sharp-dressed man with a crew-cut step out of his immaculate home in Roslyn kisses his wife goodbye and pauses to inspect the neatly trimmed lawn before heading to work in New York City. He looks every bit the rising young executive, driven, disciplined, and moderate in his habits. Lunch, if he takes it, is often nothing more than a date nut bread sandwich at chock-full o' nuts. He could be working for IBM, General Motors, or Chase Manhattan Bank. But he isn't. This man is John Sonny Franzese, 45, of 47 Shrub Hollow Road in Roslyn. Dubbed the fastest-rising young executive in the Cosa Nostra, Franzese supervises a sprawling criminal empire that includes rackets in Brooklyn, Manhattan, Queens, and nearly all of Nassau and Suffolk counties. His tools of the trade: greed, fear, and, when necessary, a gun. Franzese's meteoric rise within the Cosa Nostra has not come without risks. The Mafia is an unforgiving business, where aging executives often meet their retirement in the form of bullets. Bodies of the ambitious, ventilated, garroted, or worse, frequently turn up in the trunks of cars, at the bottom of rivers, or in overgrown lots. Despite these hazards, Franzese's ability to navigate the treacherous waters of organized crime has earned him admiration from his superiors, respect from his colleagues, and loyalty from his subordinates. According to police estimates, his criminal enterprises generate a tax-free income exceeding $100,000 annually. Even law enforcement grudgingly respects him. Sergeant Ralph Salerno, a Cosa Nostra expert for the New York City Police Department, remarked, "Sonny Franzese is the big comer in the Cosa Nostra. He has an extraordinary talent for organized crime. He knows when to compromise and when to get tough. He knows how to run a business, and crime is big business. And most important, he is an expert at not getting caught." Since turning 18, Franzese has been arrested a dozen times on charges ranging from felonious assault and attempted extortion to rape. Yet he has only been convicted twice, both for minor gambling offences. Still, his influence is undeniable. The Nassau District Attorney's Office maintains a 9-pound file on Franzese and his organisation, while similar files are kept by Suffolk Police, New York City authorities, and the Queens County District Attorney's Office. Franzese's personal discipline is another key to his success. A former associate noted, "This guy doesn't make mistakes. He doesn't drink, which the Cosa Nostra leaders frown on. He doesn't blab. He's a home man, a family man, which is very important to them. You can have a broad on the side, but go home and take care of your family. They believe if you don't respect your own family, you won't respect the family. Franzese currently serves as underboss of the old Profaci-Magliocco family, one of New York's 5 Mafia families. The family is now led by Joe Colombo, an aging boss who, according to law enforcement, is gradually paving the way for Franzese to take full control. Under Franzese's command are at least 6 lieutenants, each overseeing 10 to 30 soldiers who, in turn, manage their own criminal operations. Authorities estimate that Franzese controls more than 50% of all organized crime on Long Island. His primary focus includes bookmaking, loan sharking, extortion, and infiltration of legitimate businesses, particularly bars and restaurants. Though he avoids narcotics and has limited involvement in unions and construction, his criminal influence is pervasive. Norman Levy, Rackets Bureau Chief for Nassau County, stated, "We're convinced that he even gets a cut from some stick-ups. He seems to be involved in everything." In Brooklyn, Queens, and across Long Island, Franzese's empire epitomizes the Cosa Nostra's grip on organized crime, a business built on fear, discipline, and the uncanny ability to evade justice. As Joe Colombo fades into the background, Franzese appears poised to assume even greater power in the Mafia's shadowy hierarchy. Born in Naples, Italy, John Sonny Franzese was brought to the United States as a young child by his parents, Carmine and Maria, née Carvola. The family settled in the Greenpoint neighborhood of Brooklyn, where Carmine opened a bakery on Lorimer Street. Alongside his 3 brothers and a sister, Franzese grew up in the working-class community, but even as a youth, he showed signs of a rebellious streak, accumulating a record of juvenile troubles. Franzese's life took a turn when he reached adulthood. In 1942, he married his first wife, Ann Schiller, and briefly served in the United States Army, though his military career ended abruptly when he was discharged in 1944 after being classified as a psychoneurotic with pronounced homicidal tendencies. The couple had 3 children, but their marriage ended in divorce. Franzese reportedly contributes $40 a week to their support, while Anne works as a clerk in a New York City drugstore and resides in Manhattan with the children. Persistent rumors suggest that the divorce was ordered by the Cosa Nostra, which deemed Anne uncontrollable, a liability to Franzese's rising position in the organization. In 1959, Franzese married Christine Tina Capobianco, a petite brunette from New Hyde Park and the daughter of a New York Transit Authority employee. The couple initially moved into a house at 348 Jefferson Street in Franklin Square, which they sold in 1961 for $27,000, netting a $4,000 profit. With $15,000 in cash as a down payment, they purchased their current 2-story colonial home in Roslyn for $32,950. Franzese and Christine have 3 children, all under the age of 5, marking a fresh domestic chapter for the rising mobster. While managing his evolving family life, Franzese was simultaneously climbing the ranks of the Cosa Nostra. His sharp business acumen and diplomatic skills earned him the trust of his superiors, granting him oversight of several lucrative family operations. However, Franzese's loyalty was tested during the Gallo Rebellion in the early 1960s, when Joe and Larry Gallo attempted to wrest control of the family. Though tempted to join the uprising, Franzese's political instincts told him the odds and the firepower were not in Gallos's favor. Choosing to remain loyal to the family leadership, Franzese positioned himself as a trusted intermediary. Over the next 2 years, while rival factions engaged in bloody shootouts, Franzese worked tirelessly to broker peace. His efforts, combined with the intervention of other crime families, eventually brought an end to the war. By the time the dust settled, Franzese emerged as the rare figure trusted by both sides, solidifying his power within the family. To those who know him personally, Franzese presents vastly different personas. To his family, he is a devoted husband and father, carefully building a stable domestic life. To the Cosa Nostra, he is a shrewd operator and loyal soldier. Yet, to the United States Army, which discharged him after barely a year of service, he was a psychoneurotic with pronounced homicidal tendencies. Franzese's ability to navigate these contrasting worlds has made him a formidable figure in organized crime, a man whose loyalty, cunning and business acumen have ensured his rise to power, and the longevity of his influence in the ever-volatile landscape of the Cosa Nostra. To his neighbors, Franzese is the picture of suburban normalcy, a quiet, pleasant man devoted to his family. Living in a middle-class development home in Roslyn, far from the heavily scrutinized Cosa Nostra enclaves of Lido Beach and Atlantic Beach, he blends seamlessly into the community. Occasional acquaintances describe him as a nice guy, while his neighbors view him as an ideal family man who is polite and keeps to himself. But this facade belies the truth. Law enforcement, who shadow Franzese's every move, see a different man, a cold and ruthless mobster capable of calculated brutality, though one with a sharp wit and a surprising sense of humor. Franzese does not fit the stereotypical image of a gangster. Standing 5 feet, 8.5 inches tall and weighing 170 pounds, he is always impeccably groomed. His black crew-cut hair and preference for conservative business suits give him the appearance of a professional executive. Even his voice, low and measured, reflects a deliberate effort to shed the accent of his Greenpoint upbringing. Franzese is acutely aware of the protective value of blending into his surroundings and works harder than most mobsters to perfect the art of inconspicuous living, unlike many of his counterparts who isolate themselves in high-profile Mafia strongholds. Franzese chose to settle in Roslyn, where his presence raises no alarms. Despite his shadowy dealings, Franzese plays the role of a devoted husband and father to perfection. He is almost always home for dinner at 5 in the evening, even if he later leaves for business. 2 nights a week, he visits his mother, who now lives with his sister in East Farmingdale, and almost every week he takes his wife Tina and their children to see her family in New Hyde Park. Tina does most of the household shopping at the local supermarket, but Franzese personally handles the weekly purchase of meat, sourcing it from a butcher shop in Elmont, owned by friends. If Tina runs out of groceries midweek, he makes quick trips to the local delicatessen to restock. Franzese takes great pride in spending time with his children. He has set up a backyard play area complete with swings, a slide, and a seesaw, where he enjoys romping with them on weekends. Nearly every Saturday morning, he takes the kids out for a drive in his wife's black 1965 Chevrolet, often heading to a nearby amusement park. During these outings, he spoils them with hot dogs, ice cream, and soda, creating a picture of a loving, attentive father. Yet beneath this idyllic domestic life lies the reality of Franzese's criminal empire. His ability to maintain such a stark contrast between his public persona and his underworld dealings is a testament to his discipline and cunning. While his neighbors see a hard-working family man, law enforcement and his rivals know him as one of the most calculating figures in organized crime. John Franzese has mastered the dual roles of devoted family man and feared Cosa Nostra executive, walking a fine line between 2 worlds with the precision of a man who knows that one misstep could bring it all crashing down. John, Sonny, Franzese, leads a life carefully crafted to blend suburban tranquility with the power and paranoia of a Mafia kingpin. On Sundays, Franzese and his family can be found attending Mass at St. Aidan's Catholic Church in Williston Park, presenting an image of devout, family-oriented normalcy. Each summer, Franzese takes his wife and children to a Catskill resort hotel for a couple of weeks, a cherished family tradition. He is also building a summer home in Monticello, offering yet another escape for his family. However, when business calls, which it frequently does, Franzese travels alone to destinations such as Florida or Puerto Rico, his family left behind in Roslyn. To the public, Franzese maintains that he is a legitimate, law-abiding businessman and owner of L&R Cleaners, located at 635 Metropolitan Avenue in Brooklyn. His calm demeanor and outward respectability bolster this claim, but for those who pay close attention, there are subtle cues that hint at the darker reality of his life. The most conspicuous anomaly is Franzese's property. While his neighbors' homes feature tastefully landscaped yards with bushes, shrubs, and trees, Franzese's lawn is an open expanse of neatly trimmed grass, devoid of any vegetation that could obscure the view. Despite employing a professional gardener to maintain his property, Franzese insists on this minimalist landscaping. Police believe this stark choice stems from security concerns. Bushes and shrubs, while aesthetically pleasing, could provide cover for potential assassins. In the dangerous world of the Cosa Nostra, where bullets are a more pressing hazard than seasonal colds, maintaining a clear line of sight around the property is a practical, if unusual, precaution. However, this security measure comes with drawbacks. The Franzese's rear patio, located just 75 feet from busy Shelter Rock Road, offers an unobstructed and far from idyllic view of roaring trucks and passing traffic, making summer entertaining somewhat less appealing. Franzese owns no personal vehicle and rarely drives himself, apart from the Saturday outings with his children. During the Gallo War, he relied on his chauffeur and bodyguard, Johnny Irish Matera, a hardened criminal with a record of arrests and convictions for extortion and armed robbery. Matera's reputation as a tough, vicious hoodlum made him an ideal protector during the violent conflict. With the Gallo War concluded, Matera has moved on to lusher fields in the criminal underworld, and Franzese's current chauffeur-bodyguard is Vincent Padula. In contrast to Matera, Padula is a slight man with a relatively minor criminal record, his most serious offense being racetrack touting. Viewed as a minimum security measure, Padula's presence reflects the reduced immediate threats to Franzese's safety, though his role remains a vital one in the life of a man who can never entirely relax his guard. Franzese's life is a carefully managed balance of family devotion and criminal enterprise, with his suburban routines masking a relentless vigilance. His choices, from the absence of shrubs to the selection of his bodyguards, reveal a man acutely aware of the dangers that come with his position. While his neighbors see a man devoted to his wife and children, attending mass and tending to his lawn, the police and his rivals know him as a meticulous, calculated leader in the Cosa Nostra. Franzese is a man whose every decision is dictated by his dual existence, one that requires him to thrive in two worlds that are inherently at odds. Franzese's business day begins at 10:30 in the morning, when his chauffeur bodyguard, Vincent Padula, arrives in a burgundy 1964 Ford. Franzese steps into the car, and they typically head into Manhattan's theatrical district, often with detectives trailing discreetly at a distance. Franzese, known for his sharp sense of humor, occasionally plays games with the detectives following him. When in a good mood, he will have Padula slow down in heavy traffic and make exaggerated turn signals to ensure the trailing officers don't lose him. But when surveillance persists for days, Franzese's patience wears thin. He becomes visibly irritated and makes calculated attempts to lose his tail. Much of Franzese's day is spent visiting theatrical offices and meeting with associates, virtually all of them criminal underlings, on street corners. Franzese understands the risks of indoor conversations, which are susceptible to police bugging, so he conducts his business outdoors. These meetings often follow a specific pattern. Franzese and his associates walk together around a city block as they discuss their dealings. Once the conversation ends, another associate arrives, and the process repeats. This method, while inconvenient, demonstrates Franzese's meticulous approach to evading law enforcement surveillance. Franzese's caution extends to phone communications, as the Cosa Nostra is notoriously wary of police wiretaps. Franzese is a master of avoiding them. Although he makes many phone calls throughout the day, he always uses public telephones and ensures that no phone is used twice. On one occasion, Nassau County detectives tailing Franzese in New Hyde Park observed him walking along a street lined with public phones. Franzese, aware of their presence, approached the detectives and quipped, "Pick any phone you want. Just show me where, because you know I'll use it once and never again." Unlike some of his Cosa Nostra contemporaries who indulge in leisurely pasta-filled lunches at upscale Italian restaurants, Franzese's routine is Spartan and efficient. If time permits, he might visit a nearby chock-full-o'-nuts restaurant for a simple date nut bread and cream cheese sandwich. More often, a subordinate is sent to pick up sandwiches and coffee, allowing Franzese and his associates to eat at their desks while they work. Franzese's days are far from monotonous. Depending on his agenda, he might travel to Queens, Brooklyn, Nassau, or Suffolk. However, his methods remain consistent: walk and talk meetings on street corners and numerous calls from randomly chosen public telephones. Despite his demanding schedule, Franzese maintains one unshakable routine. He is always home by 5 in the evening for dinner with his family. This adherence to a structured daily routine, blending criminal operations with the appearance of a devoted family man, reflects Franzese's calculated approach to both his personal life and his role within the Cosa Nostra. Franzese's disciplined methods, his avoidance of wiretaps, his preference for outdoor meetings, and his streamlined lunch habits highlight his mastery of discretion and efficiency. He is not just a mobster, he is a strategist, a man who has elevated the art of evasion and control to a near-professional level. For Franzese, every step of the day is a move in a larger game, and every choice is designed to keep him ahead of his enemies, the law, and the ever-present threats of his shadowy world. Several nights a week, Franzese ventures out after dinner, sometimes staying out as late as 3 in the morning. His favorite nighttime haunts include the Flamboyant on Queens Boulevard, the San Susan on Jericho Turnpike in Mineola, and the Left Bank on Montauk Highway in Lindenhurst. At these locations, Franzese meets with associates, sips an occasional long drink, and continues his work. Though he doesn't smoke and has no hobbies beyond watching colour television at home, Franzese is a regular at first-night performances when stars and aspiring talents debut at various clubs. Whenever top entertainers like Sammy Davis Jr., Frank Sinatra, Sr. or Jr., or Jimmy Roselli perform, whether at the Copacabana or the San Susan, Franzese can be found at a ringside table. His influence occasionally extends beyond applause. 2 years ago, when Sinatra Jr. struggled to draw crowds at the San Susan, a quick call from Franzese's Chicago connections ensured a packed house the next night, filled with gunmen, extortionists, and bookmakers, all wildly applauding. Franzese's criminal operations are built on a core Mafia principle: insulation. He orchestrates crimes while ensuring he remains several layers removed from the actual perpetrators. Orders are issued in passing conversations or over public phones, never the same one twice, and passed down through a chain of 3 to 7 intermediaries before reaching the individuals who carry them out. This system creates an almost impenetrable barrier between Franzese and the crimes he masterminds. Even if the perpetrators are caught, multiple people in the chain would need to confess that the orders originated with Franzese. As authorities acknowledge, somewhere along the line, silence prevails. This insulation has consistently frustrated law enforcement, leaving them unable to convict Franzese for the crimes they know he orchestrates. In one example of Franzese's reach, 2 Queens-based check forgers were ordered to report to his Suffolk lieutenant, Philip Visari of Deer Park. Visari connected the forgers with a prominent Suffolk attorney and a private detective who guaranteed protection for all crimes short of murder. For this protection, the check forgers paid 50% of their earnings. Franzese is both commanding and pragmatic in his leadership style. In October 1964, Nassau County detectives observed him at the San Susan bar, meeting with an attorney and 6 hoodlums. Franzese was overheard delivering a non-negotiable directive. "That's the way it's going to be, whether you like it or not." His companions nodded in silent agreement. Yet Franzese is equally adept at compromise. When Vizzari complained about non-Cosa Nostra bookmaker Julie Klein encroaching on his territory in Suffolk, Franzese intervened. Klein, a defiant figure, refused to leave, and even sent a gunman to confront Vizzari. Learning of this, Vizzari dispatched his own gunman, resulting in a tense standoff in Wyandanch that narrowly avoided bloodshed. Instead of escalating the conflict, Franzese met with Klein in Freeport. Admiring Klein's bravado, he allowed Klein to continue operating in Vizzari's territory, but took a cut of his earnings. This decision left Vizzari as the only loser, forced to compete against Klein while still paying Franzese his share. Eventually, Klein exited the business, but Vizzari's unwavering loyalty to Franzese meant he continued funneling money to his boss, even resorting to petty crime to support himself and his family. Franzese's shrewdness and insulation have earned him an untouchable reputation among both law enforcement and the Mafia. Authorities acknowledge their inability to nail him down, while the Cosa Nostra regards him as a rising king. As money flows steadily into his empire, Franzese enjoys the spoils of his calculated life. With his family healthy and his position secure, Franzese's world remains one of power, precision, and the unshakable confidence of a man who knows he holds all the cards.